I knew the Marvels was going to struggle mightily at the box office, but I never really could have imagined that it would be this bad. It's breaking all kinds of records going into its second week, worst opening ever. And now it's got like the worst drop-offs ever. And you know what? The bad thing about this, be honestly speaking, I have not seen the Marvels, but I read the reviews out there. I've talked to people that have seen the movie, and it doesn't sound like the Marvels is the worst MCU movie ever. It doesn't sound like the Marvels is the worst comic book movie adaptation of all times, but that's kind of the way that it's being treated right now and the way that people are responding to the movie. And I think there's a lot more going on than people just not liking Brie Larson or thinking the Marvels didn't look very good. I don't think it was a good idea to make Freaky Friday into a superhero movie. I think that was a bad idea. But I think finally all the mediocrity, the bait and switch, all the crap that Kevin Feige and Marvel Studios put out in Phase 4 and into the beginning of Phase 5 are basically what people are punishing the Marvels for. It's being punished for movies like Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. It's being punished for movies like The Eternals. It's being punished for movies like Thor: Love and Thunder. And I think that's why all this is coming down on the Marvels itself, because unfortunately for the people behind this movie, it's coming after all those really, really, really bad ones. And I also think it's people lashing back at Disney. A lot of Disney movies have not been performing, especially in this year. They've just got a ton of bombs happening. And I think Disney fans are kind of fed up with Disney, what their culture has become over the last few years and kind of what they represent. And the Marvels basically is like the sacrificial lamb to say, hey, listen, if you don't start paying attention to your customers, we'll walk away for good. I think that's basically what's happening with the Marvels. And the numbers are just jaw-droppingly bad. The Marvels has followed up its record-breaking opening weekend and first Monday box office underperformances by posting the worst second weekend box office drop-off in the history of not just the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but comic movies as a whole. The Marvels only managed to pull in $10 million domestically during its second weekend in theaters, a drop of 78% when compared to its $46 million pull a week prior. This figure represents the worst such audience drop-off suffered by any MCU or comic book film, beating out both the respective 69.9% and 74% faced by previous record holders Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania and Morbius. Further, per Variety's estimates, The Marvels is also shaping up to be the first MCU movie to fall short of $100 million at the domestic box office. That is not good company. Last weekend it was keeping company with like The Flash and actually underperforming those, not doing as well as The Flash. And then when we look at week 2 and the percentage of drop off, the amount of people not interested in this, the bad word of mouth going out there and people realizing maybe this isn't the movie for me, even if I'm an MCU fan. And now it's keeping company with Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania and Morbius. Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania is a really, really bad movie, a terrible movie. In fact, I would say it's the worst movie in the history of the MCU. I actually think it's worse than Thor: Love and Thunder. And I think Thor: Love and Thunder is absolute trash. I think it's awful. I remember being very disappointed and thinking like the second Thor movie was maybe as bad as it could get. And it turns out maybe that was as bad as it could get in phases 1 through 3. But phase 4 was just so bad almost across the board. But we're talking like Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, Thor: Love and Thunder, Eternals, Shang-Chi, having a bigger drop-off than Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. That is bad because that is an objectively just terrible movie basically across the board. This isn't the kind of company that you want to keep. Morbius is a movie that for the most part people hate, and it does feel bad that the Marvels is keeping that company because it doesn't sound like it's that kind of bad. It's not a good MCU movie. It's not a good movie really, period, but it's not objectively terrible across the board. There are some redeeming factors about the Marvel from what I'm told, and the people that I trust that have seen the movie, they can point to things that actually work there. And they said, you know what, there was something there. They just didn't execute it quite as well as they should have, falling short of $100 million in its entire run, which Variety are projecting right now that it likely won't cross $100 million. Captain Marvel made $150 million on its opening weekend. Obviously, it went well over $1 billion in total. This is crisis-level failure on the part of Kevin Feige and Marvel Studios that you pissed people off so much. You turned so many people away on the part of Disney that you pissed so many people off that you could have a failure like this. Unfortunately for Kevin Feige and company, the film did not fare any better internationally. According to a review of early numbers provided by box office data aggregator boxofficereport.com, The Marvels pulled in a lowly $19.5 million among non-U.S. audiences in its second weekend, compared to its opening pull of $96.3 million. Should these figures stand, they would indicate that the film saw a slightly worse international second weekend drop-off of 80%. At this rate, the film will likely fail to come anywhere close to making back its reported budget of $220 million. And we know that that number is actually kind of bullshit. They actually spent a lot more money on this movie just with production, not even counting, the marketing budget and everything like this. This is a massive failure basically across the board. And the international box office really did prop up the first Captain Marvel movie and certainly was propping up the MCU as a whole. So it's not just, the culture war happening in America that's turning people off. It's actually the product itself worldwide that's turning people off. This wasn't the right movie to make, that they hadn't really gauged who their audience is and what they actually wanted. And they're being punished in the international marketplace as well. And there's just nothing good to glean here. There's nothing really to look at here and maybe see something bright at the end of the tunnel. Maybe Kevin Feige and Marvel Studios learn from this massive failure, and maybe they don't. And I do want to say, they said the opening weekend apparently internationally was $96.3 million. I'm seeing conflicting numbers. I've seen that $96 million is actually the first two weekends combined. So it might not have been a drop-off of 80%. It might have been more like 68 or 72%, something like that. Still, it's absolutely terrible, and it's just basically failing across the board. And we have seen people associated with the production start speaking out to a lot of the criticism surrounding the Marvels itself, which does seem to have become some type of touchstone as far as the culture war and all that kind of stuff, and maybe people being fed up with Marvel Studios and Kevin Feige and the direction that they take in their universe. I'm going to talk about two examples here, one from Iman Vellani, who plays Miss Marvel in the movie, and the other from the director, Nia DaCosta. And I would say one is a very professional, thoughtful response that probably is a smart way to address criticism of the Marvels. And I would say the other one is probably what got Kevin Feige and Marvel Studios and Disney in this position in the first place. Let's talk about the good response first. Iman Vellani addressed critics of the Marvels who have labeled the MCU's latest outing as woke, claiming, "I had a lot of experience in high school alone when I would share my excitement with someone and they'd immediately shut me down for being so excited. I would hate to see that within the fan community as well, because it does feel awful. If people are excited about something, let them be excited about it. And if you have constructive criticism, voice it, but never be the wet blanket on someone else's excitement." I think that is a fantastic response, saying, hey, let people have their fun. If they like the Marvels, go and enjoy the Marvels. If you think it's a great movie, then it was a great movie. It's a personal experience. But we are looking at this thing in a more macro level where we're looking at the totality of the box office and people responding to the movie as a whole. And if you don't like the movie, put real criticism behind it. Say what didn't work out about the film. Was it the acting? Was it the plot? Was it the pacing of the film? Was it the cinematography? Was the sound weird or something like that? There's all kinds of things that can make a film not good. Like the biggest criticism, obviously, of The Flash is that the CGI was just terrible across the board. It sounds like the CGI was not ready for prime time, and that's another criticism we certainly heard a lot regarding the MCU in phases 4 and 5, which I do think will get better now that Victoria Alonso was out. And it sounds like Kevin Feige and Marvel Studios are going to start pacing themselves a little bit better, where they're not doing so many projects all at the exact same time. So hopefully the CGI stuff does improve at Marvel Studios. But if you have a problem with the movie, voice it well, say exactly what your problem is. Even Iman Vellani, the youngest member of the cast, who probably should be taking notes from Brie Larson and Nia DaCosta and some of these older people, understands it's okay to have real criticism, whether it's constructive or it's positive. Feedback is feedback, and we can all learn from that. And I do appreciate that she's not going out there and just lashing out at people and calling them names and saying, hey, if someone liked it, let them enjoy their fun. And if you have a problem with it, let us know what it was, and maybe we can make it better. Now, the other response I talked about regarding criticism of the film was from the director. The Marvel's director, Nia DaCosta, also weighed in on critics of the film. There are pockets where you go because you're like, I'm a super fan. I want to exist in the space of just adoration, which includes civilized critique. Then there are pockets that are really virulent and violent and racist and sexist, homophobic, and all those other awful things. Yeah, I just don't think going out there and saying, There are pockets of critics out there that are violent for having criticism, or they must be racist for having criticism, or they must be sexist for having criticism, or they're homophobic for having a criticism about the movie. What are they saying? Are they saying something that is actually racism? Are they saying something that's actually sexist? Are they saying something that's actually homophobic? Or do they just not like your movie? Because it doesn't seem to be a racist, homophobic, sexist issue here. It sounds like nobody wanted to see the movie. It's the worst performing movie in the history of the MCU, which goes all the way back to 2008. And there was a time when MCU movies going over $400 million worldwide was an enormous success. Of course, the budgets were much smaller, and the notoriety associated with the MCU wasn't quite there yet. It did blow up into this $1 billion, $30 billion franchise that they have. But just to go out there and say that people that are critics are being violent, it's absolutely, it's stupid. It's cockamamie. It's terrible, faulty reasoning to say that if people have criticism of a film, that's violence, or calling them racist or sexist or homophobic, or saying there are quarters of the fandom that are all those things because they didn't like the movie, or they predicted that the movie wasn't going to do well, or perhaps even they kind of celebrated that the movie didn't do well. Disney has turned a ton of people off. A lot of people are absolutely mad at Disney. Marvel Studios has turned a lot of people off. A lot of people are mad at Marvel Studios. A lot of people that used to love the MCU have not seen that quality in Phase 4, and they blame Kevin Feige. And yeah, they're rightly kind of celebrating, saying, listen, we've told you what was going to happen if you kept delivering bad movies, if you didn't go out there and find the best writers, the best directors, the best characters to feature in the MCU. It was going to blow up in your face, and it finally happened. I don't think that makes you a racist, a sexist, a homophobic. Maybe you're not very nice, and maybe I'm not very nice, because I said I was enjoying the train wreck as we were watching it get up to opening weekend or whatever. But I don't think the Marvels probably deserves quite the reception that it's gotten. But I do think Disney deserves it. I do think Marvel Studios deserves it. I do think Kevin Feige deserves it. The Marvels as a film and as a crew and all that are the ones that are taking it right in the nuts because people are fed up. And finally, they decided to make an example out of the Marvels to show Disney and Marvel Studios that they've had enough. And there's nothing wrong with that. That doesn't make you a bad person. It doesn't make you somebody that should have bad names associated with them. And I think the sooner Kevin Feige, Marvel Studios, and Disney start hiring people whose response is much more in line with Iman Vellani, which was very professional, and less people like Nia DaCosta, who apparently can't take criticism, they'll be in a much better place moving forward, because then you can actually have honest discussion. But we are seeing all these things happen. There was also a small post-credit scene in the Marvels hinting at the Young Avengers, something I talked about not that long ago here on the channel, talking about how the Young Avengers were coming in and why this was such a terrible idea, and why I don't think this movie actually will ever be made because of the response to all this stuff. There's actually a link in the video description.